I'm really looking forward to go into the discussion and also to tomorrow's explorations, and maybe the presentation that I'm giving now can also open a perspective on absences as something that can also be followed up in the kind of workshop part of the workshop. And so, why absence? Why the kind of title and theme of Confronting Absence and this subtitle with Relation and Difference? There's been quite a lot of research on absence, especially in human geography in the last decade or so. Most of it focusing kind of in the context of heritage discussions on, for example, ruins as sites with Immense or Caitlin de Silva publishing on that. And usually what is focused is individual emotions that are raised in the kind of context of an absence and how these are framed. And when I was starting to work on this and then starting to work on heritage a bit more, probably my kind of sociologist training clicked in, and I started to think a bit more about relation difference and different people and power in relation to absence. So that was the background for this presentation and also a paper that I wrote on the subject. So it's also about how when we think about absences and how we experience them, which I will talk about, how are they connected to inequality and difference, and probably also kind of democracy and participation and the senses in general. So why absence? Why is this something, or what is kind of important for me when I think about absence? This is that it's an experience. So it's not about absence in general or something, but it's about how do I experience something as absent. So it's about experiencing something that is missing, that is not available anymore, kind of completely given to the senses. It's not present in a way, but it's also not nothing. So it's something that arises in the senses and in experience, which is something that I also argue in a paper that's called Absence Matters. And yeah, I'll give some more background for that. This is sound recording from research that I did in railway stations. So here we have a sensual impression. I was sitting on a bench in kind of a hidden place inside a railway station in Germany, recording video, and then I first heard this sound of kind of shoe steps, footsteps approaching. And then of course, without kind of the visual information, there's lots of things going on where you try to imagine who is this person, and then in the video recording, after a while, she appears with kind of high-heeled shoes, but then also you might have heard the kind of contrasting noise, this squeaky noise in the end, and that was she had a sports bag, so she can kind of a training session or something. Late in the evening, all kind of commuters and travelers were out of the station, and because of that, it was really kind of this hollow sound. But just as an example, so I can have a sensual stimulus. I see something, or I hear something, or smell something, and then a lot of kind of imaginations, thought processes set into motion. So absence is not emptiness. It's about, here's a replace example about missing something. Something is there that I can't experience, or something was there in former times. And because of that, it's closely kind of connected to place and materiality, especially when we talk about the city, and especially if we talk about everything that's connected to different kinds of heritage and how it is experienced. So you have to experience something as missing to try to kind of start with this imagination. And to start with this imagination, you use your body or your embodied memories. So it might be a sense of touch, it might be this sense of carrying a sports bag, similar to that one, and then having this squeaky loud, or having the experience of having these kinds of shoes and walking around a place, or in different examples, and that I will talk about other kinds of embodied memories. So what you do then is you encounter this kind of absence, you miss something, but it doesn't stay empty. It gets filled by your own memories, your own expressions or impressions. So it's you who's filling these absences, and that is why they are so important, because they are not out there, they come from you. So everything that you put inside is part of you, and because of that it's quite a powerful, can be quite a powerful experience, depending on what part of you gets kind of involved in this absence. But then again, of course, so it comes from, or arises in your individual experience, but it's also something that's produced. In art, this is an art installation in Oslo, empty chairs without cushions, which symbolize the Jews that were deported to Germany under the German occupation. There were also collaborators in Norway, and they kind of signify these. It's also at the port, at the harbor, these absences of the Jews that had to go away. And it's also kind of about the absence of comfort. So this is not a kind of chair that people feel invited to sit upon. But so it's about imagining who was sitting there and what were they kind of experiencing. You can also produce absence in some kinds of events. This was in the place where I'm living and teaching now, in Norway in Germany. It's kind of a former industrial town that recently, last year, got listed on a World Heritage site because of industrial heritage that they have in hydroelectricity. This place was in former time when it was kind of its industrial glory. Now it's deindustrialized, and kind of a story of decline for this place. But at that time, they had a world competition in skating, speed skating, and they had a world champion on this kind of skating ring. And this person talks about this time, and they play a recording, an audio recording of the time. So to kind of fill this, or to produce an absence where people kind of link themselves into it. Okay, then just another example. It's a beautiful article by John Wiley about landscape absence and the geographies of love, about memory benches on the seaside, which are erected by people who have missed their loved ones. And what you, kind of the absence that you experience is you sit up on the bench, and then you don't anymore look together with your partner onto the seaside. So it's about missing this shared experience of love in this landscape, and sharing the view with your beloved. And as I said, it's about ruins. It could be industrial ruins. These are taken from the research of Lars about former industrial workers in Nuremberg who also see this kind of history of deindustrialization as a history of personal loss, because their whole kind of bodily existence, people have lost limbs and friends and everything in industry, and everything falls in ruin, and they kind of feel very strongly about that. And then again, kind of the general idea that often is behind absence. I just mentioned the term. The trace is of course really important, and this is also part of the kind of deconstructionist roots of absence, as Derrida and others talk about the trace as being kind of inherent to language, where there's a sign that signifies something else. It's not the same. It's an absence of the same thing. So you have to fill also the meaning of the sign has to be filled from the one that's reading it. But for me, the thing when I talk about and think about absence is not so much about this kind of a mental process and the kind of deconstructionist relation between sign and signified, but really about body and experience. And this is also where kind of power and difference comes in, because, for example, in the World Heritage Site story that they now present at the Nord and Rjukan in Norway, Norway, where I'm working, it's about the story of some Eide, who's kind of the innovator, who kind of had the industrial ties, the money, the connections to invest into hydroelectricity in the beginning of the 19th century, 20th century, and who's kind of a model citizen. He protected the workers. He had all these ideas. He was almost a scientist too. So it's very much a hero story about this person. But then there's of course a lot of for whom does this story actually work, and in what way? So it's an individual kind of absence, but it's also socially coded, because I mean, it's a man, so it's also the story about gender. It's a story about, when we look at this representation, for example, about age and generation. It's an old man, and kind of at the height of this power in business and politics. It's about socioeconomic background, or not. Even not talking about this kind of background. Yeah, and it's about migration and mobility, and who can actually experience or link into these kinds of impressions. And that's kind of the important question: for whom the absence that gets represented, from does it actually work, and in what way? If it is, like I said in the beginning, that you have to use your own kind of body and your own embodied memories to link into these absences to experience them, then different bodies with different pasts have, of course, different possibilities to link into these stories. So it's about the who and how, who can be touched by an absence. It's about accessibility, who can kind of actually experience this kind of absence. What kind of senses, what kind of modalities do you have at your command to understand, for example, this presentation of heritage at this site? So there's different qualities in the experience for those who belong to the majorities, whose story might be represented at a heritage site or at an urban place. And it's about for whom something could be attractive and why it would be repellent for others. So there's differences in these kinds of experiences, and this is of course also about participation. And this is something that we work on now, and I'm in teacher education also involved at this place, and we think about how we develop a curriculum for local school pupils, where also a lot of refugees are now participating, and how they can also kind of link into this Norwegian story of success of a male elderly man or not. So it's about remembering what, whose culture and heritage, about negotiating. Exactly, it was an industrialized place. There's also kind of graffitis, I hate homos, fuck the police. Is this part of the heritage that needs to be remembered? What kind of absences, these absences are important, and why? So there's attractive and ugly memories. His office is represented, other things are not visible anymore. They're censored. And then what we talked about already, about what about the boring, the banal, the everyday, whose everyday is represented, and what kind of power relations come into play here. And to kind of sum up, the power of absence is then, it's not about emptiness, it's about how empty something that is perceived is missing is filled with your embodied senses, and in practices and practical concrete encounters with a site or a thing, or maybe also just a narrative. And it's individual, very individual, and that's why it's so powerful individually, but it's also socially connected to different kinds of social categories or groups. It's about participation and accessibility, and because of this participatory quality and the difficulties connected to that, there's also kind of an element of democracy, especially if you talk about national heritage, regional heritage, whose heritage is being represented and whose ideas. And for those who experience these kinds of absences, it might be either commitment through kind of really real bodily engagement, or it might be exit and distance and no participation at all.